Hey, this is Mechiel Kapaska, and welcome to my Fearless Innovator podcast. Thank you for joining me today. My hope is to inspire, educate, and entertain you. Enjoy the show. In this episode, let's determine if you have what it takes to be a great landlord. I've been a landlord since the year 2000. And I'm not quite sure how many tenants I've had over the years, but I can tell you that being a landlord evolves each year. And last year, I learned more valuable lessons. I bought a single-family home out of state. My strategy was to buy and hold this property and place a great tenant in it. I hired a local real estate agent, her name is Tina, to help me with the screening process for finding a great tenant. Keep in mind that our search was at the beginning of COVID in April. You know, where people were staying at home, there was the potential for anyone to lose their jobs, so the hunt for good tenants was a bit challenging. Tina processed several people, but one couple in particular sounded solid. She collected all the necessary supporting documents, an application, prior rental history, work history, bank records, etc. on the three adults. Tina had done a thorough job of collecting all the information we needed. We reviewed it together and I agreed on the three adults and one minor child. She collected the first, last, and security deposits. All money was validated and in a local bank. And it wasn't cash. Why was that important to me? I needed to know they had money in the bank to sustain their obligation on a one-year lease. On April 18th, 2020, my tenants moved in. Communication lines between me and the tenants were good. I had offered them the Simply Safe security system. It was already in place, but they had declined it. Over the next month, they had a couple of minor maintenance issues, and all maintenance issues were resolved quickly. 1 month later, on May 18th, I received a phone call. The neighbor was calling to report that the FBI and the DEA had my house surrounded with guns drawn. Can you imagine how that made me feel? I told the neighbor that when things calmed down to go over and talk to the arresting officer. She did, and we found out that this was a drug deal gone bad. I called Tina up just to validate that the software she used or the process she used didn't have some kind of flaw. She reran them again with the same result. And I by no means ever accused her of misleading me, but rather was on the hunt to figure out what had gone wrong so that I wouldn't do it again. Later that evening, I went online to the local arrest records to look up my tenant. There he was. Mugshot and all. It stated that he had 3 felony charges for drugs and weapons. The next morning, I looked up my tenant again, and I noticed something that caught my eye. The mugshot that was on his arrest record the night before was different than the one I was looking at today. That told me he had a prior arrest record, and now I wanted to know why this didn't come up when Tina did her thorough search. Now I wanted to talk to the arresting officer. I called the office that I thought had arrested him, but she said no, and she transferred my call to another office that had arrested him. When a guy picked up the phone, I started to tell him that I was the owner of the house in this one particular area, and he actually finished my sentence by telling me my exact address. And then he laughed. And I said, "Are you the arresting officer?" And he said, "Yep." And I said, "Sir, that house is mine and I'm the homeowner. And I'm a lot confused with what's just happened." I told him, "I live in Florida, but sir, I hired a local real estate agent in your area to help me with the screening process. And as far as I was concerned, I believe she had done a very thorough job in the screening process." His reply, "Well, she must not have been as thorough as you thought." And I said, "But wait a minute. Now I'm concerned because I know he has an arrest record and I want to know why it didn't show up." And he said, "How do you know he has an arrest record?" I said, "Because his picture last night and this morning are different. I know that means he's been arrested before." He laughed at me again and he said that was funny. And I was very intuitive to have figured that out. And he said, "Yes, he has been arrested before." And then I asked, "Why didn't it show up?" And he said, "It's not public knowledge and it won't show up because it was hidden from the public view." He had a special name for why it was taken off his record, but I don't recall what he called it. It had a number code to it. He wasn't at liberty to tell me why he had been arrested, just that law enforcement were the only people who could see it. And I said, "Well, could you tell me what all went down?" And he said the male was selling and distributing drugs. He confirmed it was marijuana and not pills or another form of a drug. Apparently, they have caught up to the Florida standards, is what I was thinking. He said they had been watching him for about a week. And I said, "Yeah, about a week ago, a neighbor had reported suspicious activity and suspicious vehicles late in the evening. But it wasn't enough for me to alert anyone as they technically weren't doing anything wrong." He then went on to ask me several more questions and ask if I had his bank records. And I jokingly said, "Yes, I have his bank records, but are you who you say you are?" And he said, "Ma'am, you called me." And I said, "I know, I was just checking." I said, "Yes, and I have an application and all the documentation that we gathered." He asked that I send it all to him. So I emailed it to him. About 30 minutes later, he called me back to let me know that I had done everything right. Those were his exact words, that we had done everything right. This guy just had never been caught. I then contacted my lawyer. My lawyer sent them a letter basically stating that getting arrested for a felony was good enough to evict someone at any time, and especially during COVID. At the end of all of this, they found $140,000 in cash inside my home. Cameras were pointing on every door and window, guns inside the home and in his possession, and a minor child was involved. They were out of my home by the end of May and forfeited their security, first and last month's rent, and the male figure went to prison for felony drug charges. The moral of this story is always have your ducks in a row and surround yourself with good people doing great work. Tina saved my ass that day. Ask yourself, do you have what it takes to be a great landlord? This is one of the many stories I can share about being a landlord. It takes patience, due diligence, and hard work. If you think you want to be a landlord but are hesitant to start, reach out to me at fearlessinnovator.com. Catch me later. Thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the show. If I can help you invest in your future, reach out to me at fearlessinnovator.com. Catch me later.